We had an amazing episode on pricing psychology, and you've got a fantastic book you're reading. I've got a few as well, but I think we've got to continue the conversation.
I think we've absolutely got to continue this conversation, Zach. It's been so fun to put that episode out and hear the conversation that's been coming back from people and feedback around pricing and the psychology of pricing. And I don't know if you've noticed this, Zach, but since reading the book and since talking about so much of this stuff last week, now I'm seeing these techniques everywhere I look. It seems like everywhere I look now, I'm seeing these tips and tricks and all these things that we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks.
Oh my gosh, I mentioned on a LinkedIn comment, I use my two favorite companies, Crumble and Rivian. Some of the examples I'm seeing on their websites, right? Whether it's discounting the price of the Rivian by a few $100s, so it's in a totally different price range, seemingly, or if it's Crumble with that sense of urgency, you've got to buy it today, the premium product, you can watch us make it, all of these great tactics. I love this conversation, and I'm very excited we've made a second episode.
You know what I'm really excited about? I'm excited about the day that you're going to drive a Rivian to Crumble to get a cookie. That's going to be a good day.
You know what's funny? And I don't think I've even told you this. The Rivian plug-in station, they call it like the Rivian Adventure Network, is at the Crumble in my town.
Is it really?
I could just pull in, plug in, and get my goods. It's across the street from Chipotle too, so we'll make an adventure out of it.
Look at that.
Gabe, but
all our future podcast sponsors in one place. I love it. That's amazing.
Oh man, yeah, if only they could pay for the podcast. That might help us make these purchases.
Yes, indeed.
Well, continue this conversation.
Yes, yeah. Let's dig into it. So I don't want to do too much of a recap or a rehash of what we talked about last week. People can go listen to that episode. But just as a reminder of pricing psychology, why it's so important. What we talked about in last week's episode is really getting into the nitty gritty of psychology of pricing. It's based on this book that I was reading, as Zach mentioned. Would definitely recommend the book, Handbook on the Psychology of Pricing. But the reason this is so important is because very small percentage changes in price have a significant increase in your profit of your business, way more so than any other lever that you can pull in your business, whether it's volume, whether it's variable costs, whether it's fixed costs. Price is the thing that if you get right, you are going to be much more profitable as a business. So that's why, again, it's so important to get these things correct and to understand the psychology of how people are looking at things. And we talked a whole bunch about a bunch of different topics last week. And frankly, we just ran out of time, Zach. So we wanted to extend this out to an episode 2 to get into even more of these topics.
And at some point, I know we will have episode 3. This is not, a one-time conversation. But Gabe, let's go ahead and kick things off. I feel like we have a lot of food examples today, but I also feel like that's where consumers, might see this the most. I mentioned Crumble. We've got some new examples as well. But kicking things off with scaling up and scaling down. And we've got a great pizza example. And Gabe, I'm going to let you walk us through this one because I'm totally one of those people who's like, cheese pizza is fine. I don't need all these toppings. But let's talk about how the pricing impacts the toppings themselves.
Wow, I didn't know you were like 12 years old and just wanted cheese pizza. That's
don't get me wrong, I'll eat anything, but like if I'm buying a pizza today, I'm like, oh man, cheese pizza sounds good.
So the classic story here is, as you said, scaling up or scaling down. Do you start with a large product with a whole bunch of stuff on it, or do you start with a base product and add things onto it? And so there was a study that was done a number of years ago that looked at pizza, and they said, all right, do you start with a fully loaded pizza? If we start with a fully loaded pizza and we let people take toppings off and they get savings every time they take a topping off, or if we flip that around and start with a base cheese pizza, as Zach would like to eat, and charge people for adding toppings on, which one is going to have a higher ARPU, basically, right? Or a higher price per pizza. I'm going to have to come up with a new acronym for that. But and which one is going to end up resulting in more toppings? So in the scale down version, the pizza actually had 5.29 toppings on average versus the scale up was only 2.71 toppings. And so the price that somebody was willing to pay was significantly higher in the scale down version versus the scale up version. So I think this is a really good example of thinking about how people package or bundle products together. In this case, pizza plus toppings, if you make it easy for people to buy, they're probably going to buy more. And this study proved that out.
I love that example, Gabe. And I don't know. I'm wondering if I'm eating pizza wrong. You've got me questioning, life here.
Oh man, I mean, some good olives, some good like sausage on a pizza. Come on, man.
I
That's just
I'm
good
not
stuff right
opposed,
there.
but I do just love the basic pizza. But moving on from pizza, Gabe, I sent you a good example today on the Apple website specifically, and it's focused on decoy pricing. And I brought this up with a colleague who's got a business psychology background too, and I just sent this screenshot and I said, which of these is the decoy, right? Which of these is placed on the website to kind of push consumers into a different product? And that's our next topic here is decoys. And this is a product that, again, you don't really want people to buy. It pushes them to the one you want them to buy. And again, we've got the newspaper example here. The movie
So,
popcorn is another classic one.
Yeah, movie popcorn is a classic one, and we can talk about that because God knows we talk about food enough. But I was curious to hear your perspective on that Apple example because I'll be honest, I kind of struggled with that one a little bit to say what was the decoy because I there were so many technical details under it too. But the pricing was, I think it was $13.99, $15.99, $17.99 is I believe how it was laid out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not sure. Like, which one are they trying to get me to avoid, and which one do they really want me to buy?
Let me tell you my thoughts. And like
Yeah,
I said, I
tell me.
shared these with a colleague with a business psych background, and I just prompted it saying, which one of these is the decoy? And when you look at it, the only difference between, so basically, 3 products. The base was 512 storage. The midline was 1 terabyte of storage, and the top tier was 1 terabyte. But the only difference between the top and the mid was the actual RAM, the memory. So my initial thought was, I think that middle one's got to be the decoy because, look at the storage and then look at the memory and then look at the pricing here. But then the more I looked at it, I thought that baseline, people when people go to buy, they're going to buy either the baseline or that top tier because the only difference between that middle one, the decoy, in my opinion, is the memory difference. And that's not what people are necessarily buying on in this specific MacBook. When you come in, you say, okay, well, this one's got 512 gigabytes of data. This one has 1 terabyte of data. For the most part, I don't want to say most people know how much storage they need, but the 512 is going to be enough for most people. However, if you're a power user, I was going to say like me, but I don't think I could even use a terabyte of data. That's when you get pushed into that top tier. So when I look at that, Gabe, again, I struggled between is the low one, is the mid tier, but I think the mid tier MacBook on that comparison chart was the decoy to get people into that top tier
Interesting.
MacBook Pro.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, the storage part's a little bit of a challenge. I always feel like I go through this when I'm getting a new iPhone for my wife because it's not so much that she needs the storage, but she's a digital hoarder and she refuses to delete anything, especially like pictures of our kids, or videos of our kids or anything. So her phone gets massively filled up, and then her iCloud storage gets filled up too. And then I'm constantly getting crap from her about, like, why is my storage filled up? Well, because you never delete anything. So yeah, but I feel like I struggle through that same process every time I go to buy an iPhone too, of like how much storage do I actually need on this thing?
It's the $1 million question. I think my 15 Pro is 256, which I think when I don't know what Apple started at, but I want to say it was significantly less than 256 gigabytes a few years ago. But
I think I remember when it was 16, dude. Like it's not that long ago where the choices were 16, 32, 64.
Okay, I thought the 16 gigabytes sounded familiar, but then I thought, was that the iPod Touch or was that the iPhone? But
it was probably that same as it was probably on iPod.
Oh,
also.
I think it was the iPhone too. I'm gonna have to look that up now. But again, I think that's a great example of a company we all know that's not food, having that decoy price. But Gabe, the movie popcorn example, I feel like if you Google like price decoy, I would bet my next Rivian that the movie theater popcorn is going to come up as an example. Do you want to walk us through what that looks like and what people see at the movie theaters when they're not sneaking food in?
Yes, unless you're sneaking food in and you want to actually buy popcorn at the movies. This is the classic example, and you're right, Zach. This is the one that if you Google price decoys is probably the one that comes up most frequently. But it's basically 3 different options. You have $4.50 for a small, $6.50 for a medium, and then $7 for a large. Well, you'd look at those three options and go, I'd be an idiot not to get the large. It's only 50 cents more. And I'm getting so much more. The reality is that the cost of that popcorn is almost nothing for the movie theater, right? So their margin is extremely high on the $7 or frankly the $6.50 if you're dumb enough to buy that. But people look at that difference, the price difference between the $6.50 and the $7, and they think, oh my gosh, I'm getting such a screaming deal, I'm just going to buy the large. So that's the really classic example. The other one that comes up a lot, that was a study that was done and talked about in the book, is this newspaper example. So this is a really extreme case where they did a print only, where for $59 a year you could get a newspaper thrown on your porch. Does anybody do that anymore? I feel like some people still do that. The internet only was $119 per year, or you could get print plus internet for $119 a year. So obviously in that case, the 119 internet only is the decoy, and they're just trying to get you to buy both of those things and bundle it together. And I that's another kind of classic example where it's so obvious that, you know, this internet only is the decoy, but even when it's obvious, it was still a huge percentage of people that ended up at the print plus internet version. I think it was like 75 or 80% if I remember correctly.
That's wild to me. I read all of my news online, so if I have every now and then I get the newspaper, I think, wrongly delivered to my house, and I'm like, what do I do with this? But I think you're right, Gabe. Why would you not get the all-inclusive bundle if it's the same price as, product B, product C? Which, again, I think that kind of leads us into our next item here, and that's sorting by price. And we see this on websites all the time. Apple does this. Gabe, I sent you an example yesterday on Apple's website on Apple One, which, going back to your wise iCloud fiasco, Apple One, you get like a terabyte of cloud storage.
I am so close, man. I am so close.
Yeah. And I've actually looked at it, but, since it's just me, I still get 50 gigs, which I already pay Apple for. So I'm like, well, if I'm not getting any more storage, what are they selling me on? I don't need the family plan. But with the pricing, and this is something I talk to customers about all the time, and we see it work. But that's when you arrange your pricing, perhaps on your website, basically from left to right in descending order. And Gabe, I think you have a statistic here. Consumers paid 4% more when prices were in that descending order, going from left to right on your website.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. They looked at this and it was 4% more that people were willing to pay if your website is just set up in descending order from left to right versus ascending from right to left. And I think this is really, really important too from a mobile perspective, because the reality is that most of your traffic is probably coming from mobile. I would say likely over 50% in most websites. So if you're scrolling on a web page and you're looking at three different options, well, if you've got it in ascending order versus descending order, then people may not even get to the last option, right? We know how lazy people are and how much they don't like to scroll once they get to the information that they want. So it may be that people don't even see the second or third option once they hit a particular point. So it's so important to make sure that you're thinking about mobile and how people are actually looking at your website when you're designing your pricing structure also.
And I think we talked about this a little bit last week. If not, it's the conversation I have every time. So I apologize. I'll bring it up as a new conversation. But when you do that as well, whether you're scrolling or swiping left to right, having that high value item displayed first, I think also including the features and the benefits of that offering, right? So Gabe, we work in broadband, having all of your broadband highlights there, what's included. That way, as you swipe or as you scroll and you start removing different features or different offerings, you start to build that fear of missing out. And I see this a lot on even like cellular provider websites, right? I think Verizon does a great job at this. They have a ton of different plans. Some include Disney, ESPN, Hulu. That's the one I have. I love it. They've got one that includes, I think, Apple One. So, Gabe, there you go. There's your Apple One and things like that. But you can see, as you start to pick your different plans and, at the different price points, what's being removed and what's being included. So I think building that fear of missing out, I think everyone kind of wants the most, for their dollar, right? So seeing those features being removed, I think, is another great way to do that on your website.
Yeah, agreed. I was thinking about an example I sent you this week also, Zach. So I'm looking at buying a new car. We've been sort of joking about this for
The
the
Rivian.
last
Yes,
couple of
yes,
weeks.
yes.
And I've been looking at what it would cost to ship a car from another area of the country to the area that I live. And I went onto this website to look at what the overall cost would be, put in some information. They gave me a quote, and the quote structure was laid out really interesting, where they had three options. The least expensive was actually in the middle, and it was boxed up with a big kind of red, most popular box around the middle one. And then there were two options on the side. And I thought that was really interesting because even though they didn't go descending, right, where they had the most expensive at the left and then worked their way back over, they really drew me into that middle one that, again, they probably wanted me to purchase, right? And then they had a couple of specific examples of like those features that you were talking about underneath. It was a really interesting way to do it. And I definitely see a lot of, as you said, broadband service providers that we work with, they do, most popular or best value or something like that around the tier that they really want people to purchase. I think that's another really great way, even if you're not sweating ascending versus descending order, highlighting specifically the actual product that you want people to buy is a great way to do that too.
And I think Apple does a great job of something similar here. They don't actually, going back to the Apple One example, they don't highlight, which tier they want you to join, right? They don't say this is the most popular. They have it broken down by individual, family, and premier. That's the language they use. But what they do include here is they actually break down what's included. So iCloud Plus, TV Plus, Music Arcade, and they show the prices of these services individually. And like the individual plan, individually, iCloud Plus, TV Plus, Apple Music, Apple Arcade is going to cost $28.96 a month. But since they've got this great bundle, they've crossed that price out and say, get it today for $19 a month. So almost a $10 savings. And they do that for every single one of the Apple One tiers, whether it's family or premier. They break down how much it would cost you to buy these things individually. Gabe, I mentioned, I pay for iCloud Plus today. I pay for Apple Music today. Apple Arcade and Apple TV are included in my Verizon bill, so I don't pay for those today. But if I did go back and look to see how much I'm paying today versus what Apple's offering here, that discount and having that position like that on their website, I think is very beneficial to them.
Yeah, agreed. We touched on this a little bit last week, but it's anchoring, right? It's anchoring around a specific price point, and in this case, it's the anchoring around the individual price points for each one of those services, and then showing that discounted price for the bundle. And excuse me, this sort of leads nicely into the next topic that we wanted to discuss here too, Zach, which is framing and how if you have a product that is consumed on a regular basis continuously, right? Internet service provider is a really good example of this. Gym memberships are another really good example of this. It's best to actually frame those prices in the cost per day versus the cost per month. And it reduces what's called magnitude perception. And so people are seeing that smaller dollar amount and going, oh, well, it's only $2 a day or $1 a day or whatever it is. And it just makes it appear a lot less expensive than maybe $60 or $70 a month.
2 years ago, Gabe, this is something we did. I think I brought you into that conversation with one of my customers is we said, hey, you get this for pennies a day, right? And at the end of the month, it's going to be more expensive than pennies. But when you're paying pennies a day for something versus $19 a month or whatever that price may be, it's a huge difference as far as the consumer perceives your product and service.
Yeah, absolutely. And the part that I get really excited about, especially again for the industry that we work in, Zach, and most of the folks that we work with on a day-to-day basis, because this works best for continuously consumed products like broadband, like that gym membership, it's a great way, I think, to frame this up in a slightly different way. I would love to see more broadband service providers doing this, starting to experiment with, maybe $60 a month, but let's see if we said $2 a day, if we could drive more people into a specific service tier versus, or $90 a month, maybe $3 a day, those sorts of things. That's the other piece is it works best for whatever reason, just psychologically, it works best with rounded pricing. So $2 a day. $3 a day, not $1.25 a day, or
I was gonna say, I just did like the math.
66.
I just did the math in my head, and I'm like, I'm paying, $1.83, a day for internet, and I don't want to round that up to $2, and it inflates my price. But I
Yes.
think I just love that tactic.
I do too. I think it's a really underutilized tactic, and I think it's something that would be really interesting to experiment with in the broadband space specifically, to see if that proves out like what they've seen in other industries, gym memberships, those sorts of things. And this also leads into, I know, a topic you wanted to discuss, which was breaking those larger increments down into smaller increments to make that pain of purchase not quite so bad. And we're seeing a lot now with buy now, pay later, and a lot of a lot of companies that have sprung up around this. I think Apple's actually abandoned their direct integration for buy now, pay later, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly is going on with Apple, but essentially the buy now, pay later is buy this today for it varies, right? Sometimes it's like a 0% interest loan, if you will. I think some of the businesses you mentioned, Gabe, they small percent, of course, but with buy now, pay later, people like to make purchases, but they don't like the pain of buying. They don't like to see that money leave their account, right? So when you think of some of these high value items, so I think a great example, again, let's just stick to Apple, is with the iPhone. So if you have the Apple Card, you can get 0% financing on Apple products with the Apple Card, right? So you can buy your iPhone for, excuse me, I don't know the price off the top of my head, but let's say $30 a month.
Yeah, 30, 40 bucks a
months.
month. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. For
So
a $1,000 phone.
Yeah,
which
that's
that's
exactly
a
it.
steep price.
It's created an illusion where your payments are broken into smaller increments, and you feel more in control of your finances. Now, on the consumer side, where this could come back to haunt you is if you do multiple of these, all of these due dates come at the same time, well, suddenly you have payments going everywhere. But again, like I mentioned, it does make you feel more in control. You don't have that immediately pain of, oh, I'm watching $1,000 or $1,100 leave my account. If you're buying a MacBook, that's another one. Like, we're talking several $1,000s leaving your account at once versus the $20-$30. So there's a little bit of an illusion there as well. But I think this whole buy now, pay later thing's been fascinating. Like I said, it can be dangerous if it comes back to haunt you. But again, you're just delaying that pain of spending that money and creating that illusion of being more in control of your finances and your purchases than if it was that one-time initial purchase.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely seen this go back to my car purchasing potential activities over the last couple of weeks. That's an area where I've seen this a lot. You have the sticker price of the car, but then in big letters right below it, as low as $399 a month or whatever, right? Because they're looking to get people to finance, and even in a low interest rate environment, which we are not in, but they're trying to break that down into a much lower price point rather than this massive dollar amount that you're seeing flow out of your bank account.
This brings up another example I didn't plan on discussing today, but Gabe, since you mentioned you're looking for new cars, I made the joke that Gabe was looking for a Rivian. Gabe, I don't know if your wife watches this podcast, but Gabe is not looking for a Rivian. I wish we could change that sentiment, but
I told her last night that you were trying to get me to buy a Rivian, and I was like, "What are you trying to get me divorced? Like, come on, man! Like,
that R3 it's a cool looking car, man. You'd be the coolest person in the office."
No,
but
she's not a fan.
Yeah, but Rivian does this not as bad as Tesla. I think Tesla's like the number one when using this example. But you go to their website, and what Tesla does is they will, depending on your zip code, they will automatically deduct that point of sale tax credit.
Oh yeah,
and they will automatically deduct the estimated fuel savings, which you can calculate on their website. So like when I go to Tesla's website, it's going to be like, hey, you're getting a $12,000 discount, right? So it's going to say like, actual price, your price kind of thing. And the reality is well, one, it's estimated savings, and two, it's assuming you qualify for that tax credit. But they're really making, that interest payment as low as, I guess as attractive as they can, as low as they can make it based on your scenario.
I thought that it's so funny you mentioned that, because I am looking at Teslas. That's what I'm probably going to end up purchasing here in the near future. And I noticed that same thing about the estimated gas savings. I thought that was fascinating. The tax credit, that one made more sense to me because a lot of people have, it's a big reason why a lot of people have gone to EVs is they do get this significant tax credit, especially if you live in certain states. You can even get a state tax credit as well as potentially a federal tax credit. But it's so devious to include the gas savings in there too. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I played around with it, right? Because like I don't have a daily commute, so I'm not like driving every day, you know. Typically when I do drive though, it's long road trips. Right? I told you I was just in Jackson, right? 6 hour drive, two ways kind of thing. 12 hours behind a windshield, right? And I think of like filling up, on those trips or getting ready and all of that, and then I think of just like having, let's just say like the EV, the gas savings, and it's super interesting to think about, and I can't tell if I like that Tesla includes that or if I think they're being a little optimistic with their fuel savings, but I think it's certainly a consideration. But the reality is, if I go out and buy a gas car today, I'm not really thinking about fuel savings, or maybe as not as much as I should be. I drive a Toyota 4Runner, so I get a good 19 miles a gallon. So anything's an upgrade. But it's just interesting because that's not a tactic you see many dealers do or many
No,
automakers do.
no, I don't know that I've seen it in any other place. It's definitely something unique that they're doing, and I'm with you. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or bad. I mean, they're obviously freaking geniuses when it comes to this stuff. So it obviously probably does make sense for them. I'm sure they've tested it, but it's definitely something unique that they're doing. And I know we wanted to talk promo
Yeah.
pricing and Tesla a little bit as well. So we've kind of been talking a lot about Tesla already, but
Man,
they
what's
definitely
going
have
on in
some
Gabe and
interesting
I's
things.
lives this week? I think you can
I
tell.
know. You can tell, yeah. Gabe's been shopping for a lot of Tesla vehicles this week. Is basically what's been happening. So, kind of the last topic here, Zach, is promotional pricing, and this is something obviously it's something that you see everywhere all the time. Sale pricing, regular price $100 on sale for $90, so those sorts of things. So there's some best practices or again psychological ways to approach this to make sure that as you're discounting, as you're running promotions, that you're doing it in the most effective way. And we wanted to kind of talk through some of those specific examples. The first one I wanted to hit on here, Zach, is just how you're framing up the discount depending on the price of the particular item that you're selling. So if the regular price is below $100, then discounts should be expressed as a percentage because it will appear to be higher. Versus if it's over $100, the opposite is true. You want to make sure to express that as a dollar value. So as an example, if it's a $200 product and you're offering a 10% discount, 10% discount in that example would be $20. Well, 20 is more than 10. So you'd want to say $20 off, not 10% discount. And the exact opposite is true if it's less than $100. So if it's a $50 product and you're offering a 10% discount, then a 10% discount is higher than the $5 that you would be offering in that particular thing. So again, just thinking about it from that lens of, well, where is my product priced at? Is it below $100 or above $100? And making sure that you're presenting the discount or the dollar value discount appropriately based on where that threshold falls.
I love this one as well. Every time I see like, oh, a 10% off, 5% off, whatever that number may be, 15% off, right? I calculate it in my head and I'm like, oh, well, the reality is that's only a couple of dollars off.
Correct.
Whereas, some of these higher value items, when they go on sale, price is crossed out. You've got the new price and you can kind of see that difference as well. So Gabe, I think that's a fantastic example there.
And I used this example last week in our episode, but we talked about me purchasing a ladle from Amazon, and it was discounted or it had a promotional price, and it was like $9.99, and I think the actual price ended up being like $8.50 or $8.70 or something like that, which is only $1 discount or a little over $1 discount. Well, they didn't say $1 off. They said 14% discount. And they had a big slash through the regular price and then a huge thing at the top that said 14% discount in red. So that's a really specific real world example of when you'd want to do that, because all of a sudden I felt like I was getting a great deal. I was like, oh man, I got a 14% discount. I'm crushing it on this great deal that I got, right? So it's just that perception of how people are going to think about it when they see those numbers.
Yeah, and just to give some examples here, thinking more of tangible goods, why not? We'll think of Tesla again, right? But Tesla's a company where I think in the news they discount their products every few months, or especially at the end of the quarter to move inventory. I think that's something we commonly see in every industry, right? Moving inventory at the end of the quarter. Why they do this? Of course, they want to boost sales. Whether it's I guess boosting sales kind of aligns with moving inventory, but if they have a new model coming out, we saw this the past 6 months with the new Model 3, we want to get all those old models out because demand for those will fall. And then what you also have here is trying to get that market gain, right? Especially, maybe as a newer tech company or a newer automaker company, you want to get your product out to the masses. The downside of this, though, I think we could focus a little bit on like what that loss aversion looks like. What does the brand image look like? I see it all, like I remember seeing this on Reddit all the time. Is when the Model Y came out, it was like these $60,000 cars or somewhere around there, especially during the pandemic. And then they started like cutting the prices by 12%, 5%, whatever. It was a pretty significant number. But now people who just bought their cars yesterday, and now the price is $10,000 less today. They're like, well, great, we just paid for this, and now we're underwater, right? So there's a little bit of harm to your brand image there. Going back to the Tesla example too, though, I think it was just a few months ago, full self-driving, Tesla's full self-driving solution they have, which in my testing has been very cool. It's more of a party trick in my opinion, but very cool nonetheless. They cut the price from, I want to say 15,000 down to 6,000 or 9,000, somewhere around there as well. So now you have people who have gone out, they've bought this, they've spent $15,000 on this feature, and now it's being sold for half the cost. And again, it creates a little bit of a negative brand image. I think, from an investor side, there's some demand uncertainty too. So, there's positives, there's negatives to doing promotional pricing as well. But I think being strategic with discount pricing is very important.
Yeah, 100%. And it speaks to the conversation that we had at the very beginning of this episode briefly and in more detail last episode, which is how much do you need to change the price in order to drive a significant increase in volume? And it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, they've cut those prices significantly. Now I see a lot more Teslas on the road than I used to. Perhaps I'm just noticing them more now because I'm interested in buying one. But there's always that balance of volume and price. And one of the other things that was discussed in the book was discounting as it relates to a high quality product, to use my air quotes here. And I would consider Tesla a high quality product. If you read any reviews, if you do any research around, the electric vehicle market, they are considered really the cream of the crop, right? It's a very high quality product. And Apple is another great example of this, right? Considered a very high quality product. There's just this perception of quality when you buy something like that. Well, what happens is if people are looking at a high quality product and you discount that product, all of a sudden price becomes a consideration for them. It may not have been a consideration before, but because you've discounted it, you've now brought price into the analysis that they're doing as to whether they're going to purchase that product or not. So if you, again, are selling a really high quality product, discounting may not be the answer, because it may be that just brings price into the conversation for that customer, and now all of a sudden they're comparing you in a apples to apples way just from a pricing perspective with your competitor. So I thought that was a really interesting tidbit that I hadn't really considered before of what type of product you're selling and whether discounting makes sense or not.
That's a fantastic, Gabe. Like we said at the beginning of the podcast, as we talk through these different initiatives and these different pricing psychology tactics, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to see these, in life. And, it's exciting to see these tactics being used and, recognizing what companies are doing with pricing. But I think we've shared some fantastic examples today. I mentioned your LinkedIn post. That's where you share the blog to this podcast as well. We have some, additional insights there as well. So check that post out as well. But I think pricing psychology is just a fantastic topic and, something that marketers don't always focus on.
I agreed. I think because it's numbers, sometimes, we've talked about this before too, but, a lot of people got into marketing because of the creative aspects of marketing. Mm-hmm. And those are really important too. You need to have good creative. You need to have good copy. Your ads need to look good if you want people to, actually engage with them and look at them. Those things are really important. They need to speak to your potential prospects and customers. But there's a numbers component of this game as well, whether that's analyzing data of campaigns or whether that's just having a really good understanding of what your pricing structure needs to look like in order to actually drive profit in your business. And that's a lot of what we want to talk about on a day-to-day basis, Zach, on this podcast, or a week-to-week basis, I guess I should say. But, is helping people who may not necessarily be as comfortable with some of the numbers, the number aspect of this, really breaking this down into a way that hopefully can help people understand how they can make some of these small adjustments in their business and drive more profit.
Well, Gabe, you mentioned, price. And if we go back to college, marketing 101, the marketing mix, the 7 P's of marketing, that second P, actually, I don't know if they're actually organized like that, but price is one of the components of the marketing mix. So I think, adding that psychological component to it, it's absolutely a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay. Gabe, this was episode 2.
Trilogy? Are we going for a trilogy?
I think we could do. I think we could do 3.
I think we probably could. Maybe we need to take a break and do something and do another topic. But I told you I was reading the unpack here.
Yeah, and I told you I was reading the book on biology, which is more of a consumer. Why do we buy the things we buy kind of approach as well. So I'm sure we'll have topics on that as well here in the future. But I think that the pricing psychology has been a fantastic topic. Gabe, we've tossed around some additional topics internally as well. But I'm really excited for what we've got in the pipeline here.
Well, when I finally buy the car, we need to do a breakdown of my customer journey. I still think that would be an interesting episode because I haven't even finished purchasing this vehicle yet, but purchasing a vehicle has given me such a interesting view into customer journey and how much of a debacle it can be.
And if we do that, I have another good topic on customer experience as it relates to this trusty water bottle I've had for 5 years. And I haven't even told you yet, Gabe, this story here, but when a company says they have a lifetime guarantee, you better believe I'm going to not abuse it at all, but take them up on that offer. So I definitely want to talk about the experience with that. Your experience with buying cars too. The only car I've ever bought was from a dealer, and it's Toyota. So obviously it's the best of the best, but the whole dealer experience is just terrible. So that's why Gabe, we did an episode a while back on direct to consumer. That's where I think companies like Tesla, Rivian, that's how I want to buy my car. I don't want to go to the dealership and haggle around a paint protection film that they marked up 600%, But I think the customer experience component is definitely a topic we should be discussing in the future.
100%. And I am so with you. This experience has been atrocious. And I don't want to step on too much of what we can discuss there, but I'm almost at the point where I would be willing to pay 10 to 15% more just to not deal with the gigantic pain of a dealer, because it is awful.
And we'll close with this, but Gabe, I actually told you, I said, to me, I would buy directly from Tesla just to avoid having to deal with anyone else, whether it's a dealer, a third party, any of these companies that sell cars out of vending machines, things like that. I'm all about the direct to consumer. So, Gabe, let's continue this conversation here in our next episode, or even after our pricing psychology series. But thanks everyone for joining us today. I can't wait for the next episode. Be sure to follow Gabe and I on LinkedIn. Like I mentioned, Gabe posts some great highlights from the podcast.
Zach, do you want to talk about shorts? We've been doing some shorts on YouTube.
YouTube Shorts could be its own episode, but if you want to catch the highlights too, and maybe I should have put this call to action in the beginning, because then people would leave and go watch the 60-second clips. We've got 60-second clips uploaded to YouTube now, so you can catch some of the highlights from the episode. So definitely check out our YouTube channel as well. Gabe's been doing a great job of posting these links on LinkedIn, and I'll share those as well. But definitely connect with us across all of your favorite platforms.